You are hurting your clients if you continue to do this. Hey, Dr. Ken Kaufman here, and welcome inside the training room. Now, I wanted to take a quick minute to share with you my perspective on a controversial subject that generates a lot of questions with my patients. For nearly 40 years, ice packs have been the go-to first aid tool on athletic fields and training rooms around the world. It has become the unquestioned first step in the treatment of soft tissue sports injuries, and it's easy, cheap, and it's readily available. In fact, over my career, I've regularly prescribed ice for low back pain patients, other sports injuries, and just overused muscles. But all that changed in 2015 when I was with the Baltimore Orioles at their spring training facility right here in Sarasota, Florida. Now, at a game in Boston, their second baseman, Johathan, suffered an injury the night before. The team flew him down to Sarasota for treatment and rehab, and it turned out that he had partially torn his PCL and he sprained his MCL in his right knee. I was there to treat a couple of other players, and I listened while their head athletic trainer, Richies Bancels, went over Johathan's MRI results. As he sat there, his knee was obviously swollen, and I could tell he was in some discomfort. After several minutes, I took the assistant athletic trainer, Brian Ebel, aside, and I asked him, why doesn't he have ice on his knee? It was then that Brian said something that shocked me. He said, "Oh, we don't ice injuries anymore." And I'm like, wait, what? For me, it was a statement that started the meltdown. Now, I had all the questions that everyone asks. What about the inflammation? And what about the swelling? The truth is, when you go over the research or lack of research on icing injuries, it actually becomes obvious that you shouldn't ice an injury. In fact, reaching for an ice pack following any injury actually does more harm than it does good. Of course, this challenged a long-held belief that I had. I personally soaked my legs in ice baths following long marathon training runs on a regular basis. As I said, I recommended ice to my patients nearly every day, and I would have my kids ice their sore knees and their twisted ankles. So what is it about icing injuries that is so wrong? I mean, everyone has used ice at some point in their lives. I mean, who hasn't put an ice pack or a bag of frozen peas on a twisted ankle growing up? And then there's that acronym that everyone seems to know. Remember, RICE, which stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. I mean, every trainer, health professional, and even soccer moms know that acronym. It was actually Dr. Gabe Merkin who first coined that phrase, or that acronym, in 1978 in his book literally called The Sports Medicine Book. But over time, Dr. Merkin understood that he just came up with a catchy phrase to describe what, at the time, everyone considered to be the holy grail in dealing with injuries. But he gradually modified his position, and in 2014, he changed his tune, stating, quote, "Coaches have used my RICE guideline for decades, but now it appears that both ice and complete rest may delay healing instead of helping." Okay, so now what? What created this shift? How could such a well-known and commonly used modality be so wrong? Today, I'm going to review the stages of tissue repair and healing, and once you consider this physiology, it becomes obvious that placing ice on injured tissues is the wrong approach. Not only that, but emerging research is also showing that utilizing ice submersion baths, ice packs, and other cryotherapeutic modalities actually diminishes athletic performance, long-term muscle hypertrophy, and it compromises exercise recovery. So, let's quickly review the 3 stages of healing. But first, every time I have a discussion with someone about this, they always ask, what about the inflammation? What about the swelling? Now let me tell you, I asked the exact same questions, but let's dive into it so we can have a better understanding. The first phase of the healing process following an injury is, are you ready for it? The acute inflammatory phase. Why is this so important? Don't we need to stop the inflammation? Now understand this. In order to have full healing and repair, we have to have the acute inflammatory phase. And each phase has to occur in a sequence. In other words, if there's no inflammatory phase, there can't be a second phase. So what is the first response when someone twists their ankle? They want to put ice on it. Why? To stop the dreaded inflammation? Why? Why do you want to delay and stop the inflammation? Even worse, by taking anti-inflammatory medication, you're actually further reducing the ability of the body to go through this important phase. So, the question is, why do you want to compromise the body's natural capacity to heal by interfering with the natural and necessary inflammatory process? Now, just so you know, I've recently walked the talk when it comes to this subject. Several weeks ago, I rolled my ankle during martial arts training and went down like a ton of bricks. And I actually drove myself to the hospital just to make sure I didn't break a bone. And that was certainly a possibility considering the pop that my ankle made when I rolled it. But after an x-ray, it was revealed that fortunately I didn't break it. But an MRI did reveal 80% tears of the ATF and CF ligaments. Of course, the recommendation at the hospital was to wrap it with a compression bandage, ice it, and immobilize it for several days. And what did I do? Well, first, I didn't follow any of that advice. In fact, here's a video of me the very next day walking carefully without the compression bandage, and I never iced the ankle. So you actually want the inflammation. The problem is that inflammation hurts. It's painful. Of course, you have tissue damage. Now, icing will provide some temporary pain relief by numbing the nerves in the area, but that's at the expense of the needed inflammatory response. And I think it's obvious that you don't want to interfere with this phase. In order to progress to the next phase, you need to have inflammation. That's the trigger. So don't delay the process. Hi, and welcome back. Dr. Kaufman here again to shower you with more words of wisdom on the fallacy of icing sports injuries. Now in part 2, I revealed the physiology of the necessary first phase of healing and that you actually need the acute inflammatory phase in order to progress to the next 2 phases. But now the very next universal question that always comes up is, what about the swelling? Now here's where it really gets interesting. Let's ask, where does the swelling come from? Is it from too much going to the site of the injury, or is it not enough being able to escape? Okay, think about that. Of course, it's impossible to argue that there's too much going to the site of the injury. And if anyone tries to attempt to make that argument, then they are making an argument that the body's inborn, innate intelligence doesn't know what to do. Okay, so it's the same intelligence that knows how to beat your heart, filter toxins out of your blood and the liver, and it gives you the ability to fight off infections and heal broken bones. Really? For me, it's impossible to believe that the same capacity of the body to know exactly how to digest my last meal and create new tissue cells that eventually become part of me doesn't know how to heal a twisted ankle. So, it's not that there's too much going to the site of the injury. Can it be that because of the lack of movement, there's a buildup of fluid? Could it be that due to inactivity, the fluid can't escape? Remember, before we had doctors and soccer moms telling us to sit down and ice our ankles, we just walked it off. Think about it. If we did this while on a hunt or working the crops, we would starve or get eaten by what we were hunting. So, how do we get rid of the swelling? How do we encourage this buildup of fluid just to escape? Understand that tissue swelling is mediated completely through the lymphatic system. And the physiology of the lymphatic system is that it is a passive system. It's activated by muscle contractions to move fluid and waste products away from the site of injury. The contraction of the muscles actually creates a pumping action to squeeze the lymph vessels and transport the waste products and fluid away from the injured site. Understand this, ice does not have any effect on the lymphatic system. In fact, the combination of compression, ice, and immobilization causes stagnation of the toxic fluid. It literally traps that fluid, mast cells, and proteins in the area, which actually creates more tissue damage. So, what do you do? As I stated, muscle contraction is the mechanism that pumps the fluid and swelling away from the area. So, get up and move. Yesterday, I showed a video of me walking on my torn ankle. And that is exactly what someone should do, but within a pain tolerance. Careful movement and muscle contractions while not doing more damage to the tissues is essential. The key word with this is careful. Now, I understand in some cases of severe injury and in cases that there is also instability, you can't really move the joint. So even careful walking is not possible. So what do you do in this instance? Isometric muscle contractions will accomplish this. However, this can become very tedious. Imagine sitting there for hours consciously contracting your muscles isometrically. No chance. Fortunately, there's a product on the market that will help us in this process. The Mark Pro recovery device is an awesome product. It is a cutting-edge electronic muscle stimulator designed to aid in muscle recovery. It actually initiates electrical impulses to the muscles through electrodes placed on the skin, and at a certain frequency, it causes isometric muscle contractions without moving the joint or even fatiguing the muscle. You can see one in action with this video that I filmed myself to aid in my own ankle recovery. As you can see, my quads and calves are contracting. That contraction is creating a pumping action on lymphatics, aiding in the clearing of the swelling away from my ankle. Didn't I tell you I walk my talk? Literally. Now, another modality that is helpful is Class 4 laser therapy. It uses a process called photobiomodulation, which is a fancy word for high-powered infrared light, which passes through the skin into the target tissues, and it actually stimulates the mitochondria of the cells. And this stimulation results in increased microcapillary circulation around damaged tissues. It also helps facilitate the removal of swelling, and it also decreases pain. And you can see it in action here on my own ankle. All right, we're getting into some great information, and thank you for watching. In the next part, I'm going to help you discover the detrimental effects of ice and other cryotherapy and the detrimental effects it has on athletic performance. A study performed in 2009 revealed the cellular level effects of ice pack application on the hormones and inflammatory mediators on athletes. As a result of testing blood samples at various times before, immediately, and at 60 minutes after a strenuous 80% maximal speed workout, without and with local ice pack applications, the results were revealing when they stated, quote, local ice therapy immediately following sprint interval training was associated with greater decreases in both pro and anti-inflammatory cytokines and anabolic hormones, supporting clinical evidence for possible negative effects on athletic performance. Other studies support these findings, and surprisingly, studies also show that the long-term negative effects that ice has on muscle recovery, muscle hypertrophy, and also muscle strength. So when your client is working out and trying to gain muscle size and strength, if they're using ice to recover, they're working against themselves and putting in all that effort for nothing. These studies further revealed that active recovery, such as riding a stationary bike after strenuous exercise, is a superior strategy to recover from exercise-induced muscle damage. So in short, dump the ice. Thanks again for following along. Make sure to like, share, and comment on these quick videos. I hope they brought you value and you can utilize with your clients, patients, and for your own personal strategies. Thank you once again.